вечора з Odesi, з України. So welcome to this Sunday live stream. I'm here in the center of Odesa. Sun is going to set just over this direction, so I got a little bit of sunshine here. The long shadow down along Bessarabia, one of the pedestrian streets here in the center. Quite a famous street if you've ever come to Odesa, and actually named after a guy, de Ribas, whose mother was Irish. So that's a little bit of the Irish connection to Odesa. And I put maybe a bit of a provocative title on today's live stream because last week I had an update on the vibe here in Odesa. La fin, the end of an era in Odesa. And actually we have this slightly melancholic violin playing in the background, probably pretty apt. Couldn't have anticipated that, but it's worked out. So in today's live stream, I'm going to be discussing the change in the name of my brand. It has been for many years, since 2018 Tsar Experience. I started a soft rebranding, or a soft rollout of my rebranding about 2 years ago now. And this week I did, as I promised on last week's live stream, I changed over the domain name. And it is the end of Tsar Experience. I guess there's still some vestiges there online. So if you see them on the website, or which is now connorklein.com, please point them out to me. It will take me probably a few more weeks of spotting them, but everywhere the rebranding has been pretty much done. Not that it was a huge amount of work. So I'm going to be discussing the reasons for the rebranding, how that ties in with the geopolitical situation, and also a little bit about how to experience this region, the social changes that I see, and going forward into the future, and what it all entails. So, and I won't talk too much about the geopolitics. I promise I have another channel for that. Link to my geopolitics channel down below. I did do a live stream there today where I discussed the Putin-Trump summit. Last week I said it would be embarrassing, and as you can imagine, not too many Ukrainians are impressed by the red carpet treatment that Vladimir Putin received, and I don't anticipate seeing much peace here in the short term as a result of the endeavors of Donald Trump to find, first of all, a ceasefire, which he seems to have given up on today, and any sort of peace agreement. But we will maybe come to that in the Q&A. Привit, my name is Connor Klein. If you're new to this channel, I help high-level guys living their best life in a region I call New Europe, part of the rebranding, obviously. That is the area between Germany and Russia, or Russian-controlled territory, de facto, not necessarily de jure. And that includes basically helping my clients with the alternatives to coming here to Ukraine, because from 2020 to 2022, with that whole COVID mess, I had the leading channel for coming here and living the high life in Ukraine, relocation, relationships, and living your best life, real estate, visas, getting citizenship, all that good stuff. That was the focus of the channel since the invasion of 2022 by Russia of Ukraine. I've been helping my clients mainly with the alternatives, although I do have a client who I'm actually leaving Odesa tomorrow to go and meet. We're going to go to, I think at the end of the day, we're probably actually going to come to Odesa as well, but we're going to start off in Lviv, lovely Lviv. So he is a viewer who's been following me for many years, and he's visited some parts of the region before. He's never been in Ukraine, as far as I know. He's never been in Ukraine before, and he is planning to move here in medium term, not right now with the Russo-Ukrainian War, but anticipation of it ending reasonably favorably for Ukraine at a certain point, and he wants to explore his options here in terms of relocation. So we'll be looking at real estate and which city is the best fit for him, but he is the exception to the rule. My other clients want to go to alternatives, so I've been helping them with just trying to get rid of that shadow of my phone. I gotta stand maybe like this. That's the best way to stand because it's right with the sun. Yeah, maybe that's better. with going to countries like Poland, 3 Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, Moldova just up the road, and Kazakhstan. Also open to helping clients with Romania and Czechia. I gotta keep at that angle, okay? Gotta remember. So if you are interested in having my mentorship, there is an application form down below for the New Europe experience, my premium in-person experience, where we're gonna go for up to 1 week to a city that we agree on. And you will basically have my encyclopedic knowledge and experience of over a decade in this region with you. We're gonna sort out which is the best city for you, presumably. Hopefully it will turn out to be the city that we go to first, but sometimes that isn't the case. I'm a former lawyer, actually worked at the institutions also as a lawyer for a few years. So we're gonna look at the legal options for relocation, so visas, residency, all that legal stuff that needs to be taken care of, buying real estate, also socializing. Most of my clients nearly always are single men when they start out. They often don't end up being single for too long. That is one of the main leitmotifs of the in-person experience. So I probably have, actually you should go back and look for my playlist. I don't have a link, maybe I have a link down below for like a series of tutorials for dating the 9s and 10s, uber beautiful, and possibly women with the right values for you that you can find in this region. Better than the dating scene back in the US and the UK, etc. The core angles for sure, if you are a single guy, that I can recommend, but you need to understand the cultural differences and the nuances here, both socially and of course networking with a high level guys that are going to be a good fit, because as one of my former clients said, who's married and expecting his first child with his Ukrainian model wife, and I mean a real model, a real catwalk model, not one of these other dodgy models that do other stuff online, which are effectively, yeah, we won't go into that. His main issue when he used to live in Kiev was he had no male friends to hang out. He was building nomads, so we deal with all those particular issues, and you can do all this stuff yourself if you're willing to invest enough time, but it's probably going to take you months, if not years, to figure it all out by yourself. So if you value your time enough to invest in having the solution provided by me, then there is an application form down below, because it is by application only. It might be a good fit. There's always the option of my consulting. You can go down and invest in that, and then we can jump on a consulting call and we can figure out a DIY solution for you where you can do, you can come to the region by yourself. And I did have a client who invested in that pretty recently for going to Riga, and I checked in with him about a week ago, just before my live stream last time, and he has a girlfriend at the moment from Riga. He actually wasn't even going to go to Riga. Even having consumed my content, watched lots of my videos, he was convinced of going to Warsaw, if I remember. But when I explained why it would be a better fit for him to go to Riga, he took that advice, so it seems to have been a very good investment for him. So that's also an option down below. And if you are planning to come to Ukraine, then, well, you can also apply with the same application form. It will be obviously very different because we have curfew here from midnight to 5 a.m. So it's not about socializing with the Uber hotties of the region, although we will be doing some socializing with my client next week for sure. You can always apply or write me. Better just apply in the application form, say that you're interested in Ukraine, and we can discuss it. It's a different in-person experience. Obviously, you have to be cognizant that this is the biggest war in Europe since World War II, the Russo-Ukrainian War. And also I have probably a unique guide for coming here. It's down below, as well as a guide, the insider's guide for going to magical Moldova. Both those guides down below. You're gonna not only get the best logistical and how to stay safe as possible information in the guide for Ukraine, but also you're gonna have my hospitality guide for bars, cafes, etc. here in Odesa, Lviv, Kyiv, Chernovtsi, and Uzhhorod. They're the 5 cities that most guys are interested in going to if they do decide to come to Ukraine, with that caveat that you have to be okay with the risks of coming here at this time of a war. And also, if you want to avoid a war and be in a place that is super similar to Ukraine, then that is Moldova, and I have the insider's guide to magical Moldova down there. And you will get my hospitality guide to the best bars, clubs, restaurants, cafes, and shisha lounges in Chisinau. I compiled that over 4 summers. I went to a lot of places. It was a lot of fun. I checked them out so you don't have to invest months in Chisinau to figure out where to go. and also went to almost 10 vineyards. I actually went to, did I go to 10 or is it 9? Anyways, that's also outlined in the guide because Moldova has great wine. So that's all down below. That is the housekeeping out of the way. Actually, do I want to go this way? What is the view going to be like? Is that, well, maybe with the sun. Anyways, I will walk down Bessarabia in a little while. Let me see. Yeah, if I put it there, yeah, it's actually a little easier for me to hold. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a presentation. After I will come to Q&A, so write your comments and your questions in the chat there, and I will come to those afterwards. So when I started on YouTube, let me take you all the way back. I think it was it 2014? I had a very geeky language learning channel. It was called Language Tsar. Basically, that domain name was free. That's why we took it, and we thought Tsar, a bit like with the drug Tsar, or I don't know, there are lots of different Tsars. Basically been kind of denoted expertise in an area, and I was helping guys with how to learn languages quicker because that was one of the passions of mine. And you know, I was going to these events. I've been invited to conferences to speak. I speak a lot of languages. This is a side note. I speak over 10. And that was basically the emphasis of the channel. And I made lots of geeky videos on an iPhone, which didn't have the same quality as today. Nor was I that experienced with speaking on camera. I was pretty bad. So basically, I did my internship, shall we say, of being on YouTube with a very geeky channel. And I had it as kind of a hobby. I had the aspiration to turn it into a business that would be enough for me to not only pay for traveling and hanging out. And I was going between Western and Eastern Europe and also Brazil at the time. Western, Central, and Eastern Europe and Brazil were basically the main places that I went to. I also had a great trip to Lebanon, I remember at the time. And I wasn't really documenting that. Fast forward, I wanted to try and create a business here on YouTube with a YouTube channel. And I was inspired by a Polish girl I was seeing at the time because she said, why don't I document my life? I'm going all these nice places in the region. And yeah, I'm hanging out with pretty girls all the time. She was one of them, obviously. And I started to film a little bit more. I had no idea what I was doing with vlogging. I bought a DSLR camera inspired by Casey Neistat. I think it was the Canon 70D was what I started with. And I started to vlog a bit, but I didn't really know what I was doing. Some videos actually got a little bit of traction on YouTube. And then I went to a mastermind organized by two of my friends who've been involved in building businesses with language learning, which I haven't been successful at in terms of business side. And they came up with the idea, it was actually my good friend Jan, of the Tsar Experience, along with Ollie, another friend, and their mastermind. And everyone chipped in, and basically I rebranded, created the logo, and the idea was that it would be focused on this region. And primarily, I started to film and continued filming in Ukraine, Belarus. And I think that's what all the content was from in the beginning. And basically, I was helping guys in the beginning. The idea was just giving advice about coming to this region. Cost of living was lower, dramatically lower than being in North America or in Western Europe. And the dating scene was obviously a big attraction for single guys to come to. And it was one of the reasons that I was interested in the region. Not the only one. I had actually had an academic background in the region in international relations. I went to SAIS, School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins, which was, at least at the time, ranked #1 in the world for international relations. And I focused on this region, so I was really interested in the geopolitics of it. And I'd also been learning Russian, which was, at the time, very useful. I'll go into a little bit how that has changed. It's not as useful as it once was. So this city, Odesa, was the main language back in the day. It was official language of Ukrainian has been since independence. The official language of Ukraine has been Ukrainian since independence, 1991. However, on a day-to-day basis, everybody was using Russian here, so I really improved my Russian. And that was also in Belarus, where it is an official language. So I started to document that, talk about it, and then I had a guy reach out to me, and he basically made me an offer to show him around here and basically party, because he had broken up with his girlfriend or some girl he was seeing in Kiev, and he flew down. He had already tickets for Odessa, and then the Tsar Experience was born, and it became an in-person experience, and we were largely focusing on Belarus and here in Ukraine. And I actually went once in 2019 to St. Petersburg with a client, and also we went to Moldova as well once, to Chisinau. And that was basically it. We would come and we party here. It was focused a lot on meeting women back in the day. and this kind of post-Soviet vibe. Russian language was very strong in the place I went to, whether it was Moldova here in southern Ukraine or even in Kiev at the time, and also Belarus, in Minsk, even though there is Belarusian, which I was invited back in the day to learn. It was 2017, was it, or 18, that I went to Belarus to learn Belarusian, that I still speak. And I'm still optimistic one day it'll be useful to have learned in some way. And that was the main emphasis, and there was this definite difference between being in Ukraine. Obviously, Lviv was always a bit different, within Ukraine. The Ukrainian language was the main language, and it was maybe a bit closer culturally to Poland than other parts of Ukraine, which were further in the east or in the south. And already this time the Russo-Ukrainian War had started. We had the occupation of Crimea and the seizure of parts of the Donbass by Russia. But even within that context, the diplomatic relations weren't as grim as obviously they are since 2022, and the region was quite different. It wasn't such a big deal to speak in Russian. I even spoke in Russian in my videos. We did one instance about when I made a video in Lviv by using the Russian language, which caused a bit of a furore, but in the end, nothing really major came of it. And this whole Russian propaganda narrative that, you get lynched on the street, you speak Russian, was so far from the truth that I made the video basically disprove it. And it was just this kind of like cost of living was super cheap compared to other parts, and especially with the value that you got. And there was this kind of like maybe commonality a bit culturally between, because there's the strength of Russian culture still in parts of Ukraine and in Belarus, and obviously in Russia, and to a certain extent also in Moldova, that it kind of had this made sense. We weren't focusing on Russia, but which obviously had a lot of political issues, and also you needed a visa to go to Russia. They were changing that at the time. But we could go to Belarus and obviously here to Ukraine and Moldova visa free. So it definitely had a particular focus, and that all made sense at the time. Obviously, fast forward. First we had COVID, which changed the business model to a certain extent. So with travel being restricted, and I stayed in Odesa when there was the last flight to Minsk. I actually considered getting the last flight out to Minsk with the COVID debacle, as it turned out. I had actually been in, where was I? I was in Central Asia just before that. So I actually went to Kazakhstan, but I went with Angela to Uzbekistan. We did a little tour, made a video there. Wasn't sure if we were going to continue filming that. I had previously also filmed in Romania, because I had spent a lot of time in Romania previously, learned Romanian. But I didn't think that had the same focus as being here outside of the European Union. That was another common factor of all of these countries. And with COVID, while I was here in Ukraine, there wasn't much traveling going on, and basically had to pivot the business a bit and how to help guys. And because the lockdowns were not, this was the best country basically to be in during those crazy days of those inexplicable lockdowns, unnecessary in my opinion. And here there wasn't so much enforcement of it, of the restrictions, so basically lived pretty open lives. And went out, and except for really in the first few weeks where the restaurants were closed, basically there was hardly any difference once you were in Ukraine. So a lot of guys were interested in coming here and moving here. Also, to a certain extent, going to Belarus. Some wanted to go to Belarus, even though it wasn't as appealing, especially after the protests and the clampdown by the Lukashenko government in August, September 2020. It was 2020, yeah. So then a lot of guys realized that Belarus isn't the place to go to with such a repressive government. And I see actually a lot of the people who are promoting it have actually left. I think there's only one real YouTuber left in Minsk who's Belarusian and still, I think he's helping Indians with moving there, but anyways, there is not much interest from what would be my target demographic, which is guys from North and South America and Western Europe. That's the main thing. Obviously, people come from places like Australia, New Zealand, and Hong Kong, and occasionally I had some people from Africa, even like Zimbabwe and South Africa as clients, or at least consulting clients. But that's the main focus. And I built up this, I was helping so many guys with relocation mainly, or to just want advice where to travel in the region. And towards the end of 2021, I had seen a change. Like, for example, in Kiev, one of my clients, who he'd invested a huge amount, millions in Kiev, was real estate. He'd opened an art foundation, and he was super clued into what was happening in Ukraine. He told me that the main language of Prestige had switched definitively from Russian to Ukrainian, and the fact that he learned some basic Russian really wasn't helpful anymore, because everywhere he went, to the parties or the bars, the cafes, basically everyone was speaking Ukrainian to each other as well. So Russian definitely declined in terms of prestige. So there we see, from a linguistic point of view, definitely a big change. And my clients started to come back for the in-person experience. We're actually going to Kharkiv, which is very close to the Russian border, about 25 kilometers from there. And then towards the end of the year, there was a lot of uneasiness about Russia's intentions. We'd had a bit of a scare earlier in the year where they started to mass troops, and then it became more serious. And obviously then we had the invasion in 2022, which, because of its nature and its like extended invasion to extinguish Ukrainian independence from Moscow, and obviously that has failed so far, there is a definitive rupture and the beginning of what probably will turn out to be a new Cold War and a new Iron Curtain. It's not an Iron Curtain at the moment, but we're heading in that direction. And there's definitely, I think, a definitive rupture between Ukraine and Russia. Obviously, unless Russia occupies the whole place and forces everybody to be subjugated to Moscow's control, that affinity between shared cultural heritage or enmity is gone for generations at this point. It's not going to be easy to restore, and it may never happen. Let's see. And if you look at the context of, say, the Second World War, well, it took about 2 generations for countries and peoples to be okay with each other again, pretty much. So I would expect at least that to happen in this case. So we definitely have a definitive rupture in this, saying this as any sort of commonality between, say, Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova, even Kazakhstan. Is kind of a complicated situation. So in this new Iron Curtain, as we can call it, the free parts of Ukraine and Moldova are on one side, at least at the moment. And on the other side, fortunately for the Belarusians, they are strapped on the other side with the Putinist model of dictatorship and repression, and really bad economic prospects as well going forward. Their economy is in a lot of trouble because of this war, but also for other reasons as well, like being dependent completely on resources. And also, just to talk a little bit more about the linguistics, also in places like Moldova, the official language is Romanian, and that is gaining ground gradually, not as quickly as Ukrainian is here. There's also been a big change now. I remember Angela used to speak a lot in Ukrainian here, but she was like almost the only person who would speak to strangers in Ukrainian in Odesa before 2022. But now, just because for me personally, there isn't much value in speaking in a restaurant in Ukrainian Russian, since I can also do it in Ukrainian. I've been learning Ukrainian for many years. I get more value out of practicing my Ukrainian. I basically don't really speak Russian here very much. I would say I speak less than 10% of the time, if even, in Russian. And the rest of the time I speak in Ukrainian. And yeah, Russian is still, it's more like bilingualism. At the moment you have Ukrainian as the prestige language, then you have Surjik, which is mixed between Russian and Ukrainian, and then you have Russian as the third. Maybe you can even say English is higher than Russian in terms of status. So it's probably number 4 in Ukraine at this point in terms of prestige. And whilst Russian is still spoken, you can still speak Russian, obviously, in Ukraine. It's not banned. Ignore that Russian propaganda BS. The reality is fewer and fewer Ukrainians are using it, and more Ukrainians are using Ukraine. So there we have another difference. And if we're to look at it kind of more broadly in terms of a collective West, I mean, it's a little bit debatable with the current U.S. president at times if we're all really pulling on the same rope in the same way. But nonetheless, the collective West, that definitely includes, for now, places like Moldova and parts that are not occupied in Ukraine. Obviously, the occupied parts are under Russian oppression, or Moscow's oppression. And even Russia isn't really fitting of the Moscow Emperor, to be frank, since they stole it from this region originally as a remarketing brand way back in the day. But anyways, that's a little bit esoteric to start talking about on today's live stream. So I feel like there isn't that commonality. between Russia, Ukraine, Moldova, Belarus, as there was when I started in 2018. And obviously having a name like Tsar, which has some connotations of the this one I thought I was speaking German, but no, speaking English. The word Tsar, even though it was nothing to do with Russia, I originally picked it from my language brand, it did fit very well, I thought, back in 2018 when we rebranded with the Tsar Experience at that mastermind, my friend Jan, but it doesn't make sense anymore, and I've discussed it with clients over the last few years, and we had that soft rebranding starting in the summer of 2023, and we phased it out since the word is too heavily associated with this war and with the leader in the Kremlin who had the red carpet rolled out to him by Donald Trump a few days ago in Alaska, which is part of the U.S. I am going to advocate for respecting U.S. sovereignty in Alaska, because you never know with the Russians, since it was once part of the Russian Empire, when they might get ideas, since Trump has a few times said he was traveling to Russia, when he obviously misspoke, but it's kind of an unfortunate mistake to make. Anyways, so that has been the development. Now when I look at it, I've been helping my clients with the alternatives, as I said at the top of the live stream, and that includes countries like Poland, definitely not Eastern Europe, for example. It's definitely Central Europe, and you could even argue where the Iron Curtain ends, the new Iron Curtain, then that's really where we have Eastern Europe on one side and we have Western Europe on the other, you could say, geopolitically. I came up with this term New Europe because it is different in places like even Poland compared to Western Europe, although that gap is narrowing very, very quickly, I think. Economically, historically, culturally. And here it's obviously behind in Ukraine, way behind Poland, same in Moldova. And around, for now at least, on the right side of the new Iron Curtain, that's descending across Europe. Two very different systems and sets of values. And New Europe experience. I can't use Tsar Experience if I'm bringing people to Warsaw, for example, or to let's say Riga or Tallinn or Vilnius. It doesn't make any sense anymore. So that is why we've had the rebranding. I think most people probably get that, why it has become a necessity. And now I finally switched things over. So it was pretty slow rebranding process. And yeah, this part of Europe, and this is the social change, because remember, so many Ukrainians have left, especially women. Because for men, it's obviously been hard to leave. I do have a friend who has left, who I was speaking to yesterday, and he doesn't have any problem coming back and forth. But that's another theme to discuss why for him it is okay. There are exceptions to being allowed to leave the country as a man between 18 and 60. But in general, so many Ukrainian women have gone and lived for part of the time in the European Union. And many have stayed for many years. Many are not going to come back. They're going to presumably meet someone there, whether they're Ukrainian or local or from somewhere else in the world, and not return to Ukraine to live in the future. We don't know yet how many of Ukrainians are going to be that way minded once this war is over. Many have come back already, but they've had the experience of living 3 years in the European Union, for better or worse. And yeah, they're going to understand European culture or Western culture a lot more, have been exposed to it, and maybe not be so enamored of it if it wasn't for them. You know, not be naive, but at least be informed whether they like large parts of it or not. Obviously, the West is also quite diverse as well, even just the difference between, say, North America and Western Europe, or Europe in general. Right? Let's say the European part, that's part of the European cultural sphere, which, you know, Eastern Europe is not nowadays. That's why I don't like the term so much, because it's really Russia, and what Russia controls, I would say, is really Eastern Europe per se nowadays, or places that are just quite far away from the European Union, like that might have aspirations to join, like Georgia or Armenia in particular, since Armenia is also considering at some point applying for EU membership now, and Georgia is a candidate country, although unfortunately the Kremlin has gotten enough influence to stymie that for now. So I think there's a big cultural shift that's taking place. Even I look at some of the matchmakers. I've even had Yelena on, right, a few times since the war started. Now, I mean, she's been living in Bulgaria. It's not as different as going to live, say, in Germany or France or Britain or going to the US, but it's still different, right? A different experience, and she's traveled a lot more in the European Union. She's been away for 3 years. Also, some of the other channels that make content, especially the ones that promote the Ukrainian traditional bride fetish. It is so ridiculous now, in particular, that whole branding, and it's dying away anyways. It seems to every year get about half the viewership, and the actors slowly leave that particular branding, and yeah, eventually it presumably will die away completely, like it did in, say, the Baltic states, like in Estonia, or in Poland or Romania already 10-15 years ago. But even the ones that promote it still, they're living in, one of them is living in Spain. I mean, it's pretty far west in Western Europe, and they're bringing up their daughter there. So, I mean, but they don't think that they're westernized. Of course they are. And they're all part of the same culture here. It's different in different parts of it. Obviously, like, Spain is not the same as Ukraine, and there are significant differences, but Ukrainian culture is moving more to being part of the, it is part of the European cultural sphere already, but obviously people are getting those experiences and of having, like what I had many years ago when I was a student, doing Erasmus and having a university exchange and getting to live in France. And obviously Ireland and France are not the same thing, but we do have a lot in common. We're part of the same polity, the European Union, and Ukraine's path is in that direction since they became a candidate country. So definitely they have increasingly more in common with, say, with Poland. Also, there's so many Ukrainians and Belarusians in Poland now as well that have left, I think, overall a positive impact on the experience of going to Warsaw in particular, that we need to think of it differently going forward. So that's what I'm saying is la fin. I'm going to put the thumbnail, at least the temporary thumbnail, at the end. So it's the end of an era in Odesa in terms of Odesa being like it was, say, before 2014 for sure, and even compared to 2018, 2019, and after the war, assuming that it works out favorably for Ukraine, which is my belief and my assessment. It will not be under Russian control. It's not going to be like in 2019 when I was filming. For now, actually, it's still remarkably good value for money. Obviously, you have to deal with Russian terrorist attacks all the time. Like, you're asleep in your bed and suddenly you're woken up by drones outside your window trying to blow stuff up, including apartment buildings. So I'm not saying that it should be taken lightly as a reason to come, just because it's very good value for money. But if I look at, say, Moldova and definitely Poland and being in Estonia or in Riga and Latvia, the price differential, it's definitely better value for money than being in, say, New York or a British city of the same size. But no, it's like 20% difference or 25% difference. And even to Chisinau is maybe 35%, but it's not massive. It's not a passport bro destination for sure in the region. And for the reason that it's not super cheap and the women are not desperate. So passport bros, they go to Latin America, Africa, or Southeast Asia, I guess. And I think Ukraine, whilst it will be very good value for money when the war ends still, if you projected out about 5 years, then it will be probably like Moldova in terms of price level. Still better value for money than being in, like Ireland, where I'm from, or the United Kingdom or France. But it won't be as cheap as it is now. So that's why in the lead up to the end of the war, and then definitely in the aftermath of the war, it will be a really good time to invest in Ukraine. It's going to be absolute boom town, I think, here, especially with a lot of investments going to come in to rebuild the country. At the moment, the main investment opportunities are sadly in the defense industry, because that is something that Ukraine is pioneering out of necessity because of Russian aggression. So most of the businessmen that I meet and talk to, a lot of them are involved in that at the moment, so which makes sense. But hopefully there's going to be other investment opportunities in lots of different industries and agriculture, everything going forward. And yeah, that will be really a phenomenal time in Ukraine, but it will not be like in 2019. The country will have changed. There were going to be very deep scars because of the war. A lot of guys are also going to come back with a lot of trauma from the front as well. And there definitely will be a very different atmosphere. And this kind of commonality as a region, more or less, with, say, Belarus and Russia and Moldova, it's going to be split, there's definitely going to be a big division, and I already see it. It's going to be a big difference. That's basically what I'm saying. La fin, the end of an era in Odessa. It might seem that I'm being very pessimistic or down about it, but, and I think one of my viewers, he wrote, it seems bleak, but it's actually not. It's actually going to be better but different. And when I look at countries like, say, Poland, you just have to go to Warsaw. It's kind of funny, all these kind of, I guess, people are more too conservative, to the MAGA types who promote Warsaw. They keep ranting and raving how great it is, but it's part of the West. It's just you could argue for a lot of, especially guys, it's going to be a better part of the West, but it's still the West where they are, even though they keep calling it Eastern Europe, and they seem to think they're in Putin's Russia for some reason, even though there couldn't be a country that's more against Russia and Putin than in all of the European continent, maybe bar Ukraine. It's going to be Poland. So I would see that. I would see the future trajectory, which I've always believed since 2014, is that Ukrainians, they don't believe that they're necessarily going to be like Germans or the French or the British. They believe they can be Poland. And seeing how inspiring Poland is as a country, with its flaws, of course, like no place is going to be utopia. I think that is what direction it's going to go. And that's probably going to attract a different type of person to come here. In general, there will be obviously an overlap, as I've seen with my clients who want to go to the alternatives. But it definitely will not be the same. That's basically the main message of this live stream. So, yeah, I think I've covered many of the cultural changes. Probably you're going to see, prices. So it's going to be interesting what happens to real estate, especially if Ukraine regains a lot of the currently occupied territory, because then people will move back there. And it'll be interesting to see how many people come back additionally after the war, whether the Ukrainians who are abroad living in the European Union will get to stay even if the war ends, because in the US it's not looking like, technically they don't have to leave. I think there's like 200,000, but they're kind of making it hard for Ukrainians, from what I read, to actually work legally anymore, which means like a lot of them are just going to voluntarily leave. I mean, that's bad for the US, in my opinion. If you don't want the Ukrainians living in the US, Europe, I think Europe should be glad to see them come back. I mean, like 200,000 Ukrainians coming back sounds great to me. And they can live in other parts of the European Union. Of course, they will gain some valuable experience in the US, get different ideas, live in different cultures. It's all good anyways, if they live there temporarily. But if they, they can gain some know-how and some new business acumen and some other cultural experience that enriches them, and then they can bring that and add value to the Ukrainian or just the broader European economy in the medium to long term, that's great. I don't think it's a good idea for the US to want them all to leave, but that's the US's prerogative, what they do with their own immigration policy. So yeah, I think I've covered the social changes pretty much. I'm going to be interested to see your comments and your questions. The geopolitics, a lot of it should be obvious. My rebranding should be obvious why that had to change. The first year, actually my clients didn't think it made a big difference. They're like, well, everyone understands because of my political stance on the war. Which side I'm on, so I'm obviously not, I'm definitely not promoting Russian imperialism. It's the opposite. But as the things have gone on, most of my clients said, yeah, it just doesn't work anymore. Not that I think I found a better name. I think New Europe Experience obviously describes what I'm calling the region. And I have a video about that. Maybe I'll link it down below if I remember later on. But it's there on my channel, why I refer to it as New Europe. And I'm only really dealing with a subset of that region anyways. I don't cover everywhere, it's too big. And also there's a lot of different diversity, but basically I am helping my clients with Ukraine, Moldova, Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, also open to Romania, which I know pretty well, and Czechia. I also go out to Kazakhstan, which I will be going to in October. And yeah, that doesn't really fit in the New Europe branding either, exactly, because obviously it's out in Central Asia. It is, some of Kazakhstan is technically on the European continent. They try to join a lot of European organizations, like they play soccer, for example, football in all the European leagues. But, which is why New Europe doesn't fit 100%, because I wouldn't really say that's necessarily New Europe, because just geography, it's too close to Russia and China. It borders them. So, yeah, if they make a beeline to join EU institutions, it's probably not going to end well for Kazakhstan at the moment. That's just a reality, that they are a bit too far away. So, anything else I should add? Last week I commented on Drifter Dan. He writes me messages, and now he wrote me that his friend is going to pay another 10K for basically kind of a dodgy trip, it seems, and basically document it and then try to catfish women by claiming he has friends that are not really his friends. That's one of the trends that I can see with these online dating apps. It's like women have been catfishing men consistently with, touching up their photos and not looking, knocking a few kgs off with the angles and the Photoshop and enhancing the way they look. And now men are trying to do it with not necessarily their looks as much, but actually the whole way they take photos and hiring actresses and all this kind of stuff. So he sent me a message. His friend is sinking another 10K into doing that rather than just documenting his real life and finding someone who's probably going to be a better fit for him that way. But anyways, he'll no doubt give me a report once they've wasted another 10K and gotten probably pretty much nowhere. So let me come to your comments and your questions, since I'm already 40 minutes into this one, and the sun is setting a little bit earlier than last week. So Josh says it's a nice location. Yes, Josh, you are no stranger here to Odesa. What is wrong with Odesa? I don't know, Rudy. You're going to have to expand on what you mean there. Brian says, lovely place. It is the main street of Odesa. Many cafes, a beautiful place. I've been there. Best for Ukraine. Thank you, Brian, for that contribution. Later, Greater says, did you read the Telegraph article about more and more young women leaving Ukraine? No, please send it to me. I'll take a look afterwards to see if there's any. I don't see much evidence of that, actually. Just to comment on the demographic situation back in 2022, because so many women left Ukraine. Because men, well, first you had the invasion, which is the reason they wanted to leave. And on day 2 of the invasion, on 25th of February 2022, the law came into effect that men between 18 and 60 could not leave Ukraine without permission. But women, children, and older people could. And as a result, so many women left. There was a huge gender imbalance here in Ukrainian cities. There was way more men than women. However, that has rebalanced over time. More and more women have come back. And it's definitely, when you go out socializing, it's at least 50-50. I would say maybe slightly more women, but it depends on the place, because some places went there were more men, but some places there were more women. So I'd say it's probably over 50-50. At least when you go out socializing. Maybe there are still way more men here and they're all hiding from potential mobilization. That's kind of something I can't really verify very well. So yeah, not sure why they're saying necessarily more women are leaving. A lot of women left and then came back. Maybe some are reconsidering. And I think there's definitely be demographic changes in the different cities. A lot of the people I know who are more the creative dynamic types from, say, Kyiv, they've left the country. And a lot of people have come from more eastern parts of Ukraine and now live in Kyiv, because the population of Kyiv has not decreased. But I think there's been a little bit of a change. People have come from Kharkiv or the occupied cities in the east more and moved to Kyiv, whilst many people from Kyiv have left. And a lot of those are going to be women. So, yeah, I'm not sure if that article is accurate about what's going on or not. James says he loves walking through the city of Odesa. He lived a few blocks away from the city park. Mark says hello. Hi, Mark. I don't see love tourists return to Ukraine anytime soon, even after the war ends. Yeah, we call them love tourists, romance tourists, in comparison to sex tourists. Sex tourists are there to pay for sex. They're looking for hookers. So romance tourists are normally single guys are hoping to hook up without paying a girl for that experience. And, well, you see a lot of them go to Warsaw. And I think they're next level delusional Warsaw. I say it so often in these live streams because of the amount of, I don't know what to call it, disinformation, just misinformation. Because you have a lot of other creators on YouTube who hang out in Warsaw and they appeal to young single men and they keep talking about, oh, this dating scene is great. And I'm like, really, where is your Polish hottie then? They never seem to have them in the video. And why? Because just when I walk around Warsaw, it's really rare to see a foreign guy with an attractive Polish woman. I see some foreign guys with unattractive Polish women, are definitely below average in terms of attractiveness. And us guys, we look at visuals first. It's not the only thing we look at, obviously, when we assess women, if we want a relationship with them or not. But it is the first thing, and it's probably the main thing that we value. For right or wrong, when women have a different set of attributes that they look for in general when they're assessing whether they want to be with a guy or not, for short or long term. But I just don't see it. I see a little bit more with the Ukrainians and Belarusians, but not with the Polish girls. So, but they still go, all these romance tours. A lot of the guys, often guys come up to me in Warsaw, and then the first thing they say, it's so hard here with the Polish women. They start saying, they're so westernized. Like, man, this is the West. I mean, you think you need to update your software there about where you are? Maybe you figured out that they joined the European Union and NATO over 20 years ago. I mean, it's part of the collective West. I would even say here is part of the collective West nowadays, in Ukraine and definitely Moldova. So 100% Warsaw is. And there's so many foreign guys running around. We're single, chasing the local girls, all on Tinder, probably chasing the few low value options that are there, because as I outlined last week, the online dating is just continues to go down in quality, even though the stats say more and more people meet on online dating, but it's not the people with options. It's like the bottom half of society, it seems, in terms of their options they meet on online dating, but not to the upper echelons for sure. There's very few little dating apps been used there successfully. So yeah, I think maybe the romance tourists will come out. You're going to have the dodgy marriage agencies, if they still exist. They will try rebranding. They will tell you that all the men died here, and the Ukrainian women are desperate to find an American husband. I mean, if they weren't desperate to find it during the war, they're not very likely to be desperate to find them after the war, especially when things are on the up, presumably at that point. So I think there still will be many who will come. They will not do very well, and yeah, my prediction is that the marriage agent business will at least not be super prevalent. It'll probably still exist, but does it exist in Poland? That all died out. But you probably will have a lot of guys who come here because of the famed beauty of the women, and that will continue to be the case. And it will definitely in the beginning still be relatively lower cost to be here than in neighboring countries. So that will probably attract a lot of guys who are single. So not in the same numbers, and not the marriage agency, because I can't see it being the same as it was before, because that was attracting so many guys because they had so much marketing for this fetish and about the traditional Ukrainian brides. But as I've said in many of my videos, if you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you as well. Later Gary says southern Brazil seems better than New Europe. No PUAs, no immigration, no sanctions. So we deal with those. Well, I don't know if there are no pickup artists there. Outside of Warsaw, are there really in this region? Maybe I know they used to make a holy show of themselves, also those Daygamer types in Belgrade, but I think they got asked politely to move on at a certain point. I'm not sure if they still hang out there. They're all outside the train station like a migrant gang of foreigners pestering local and foreign girls walking around. It's like such a I wouldn't want to be associated with that embarrassment taking place on a daily basis. Other than that, they're not in the Baltics so much from what I can see. They're not in the rest of the region. Maybe some of them hang out in Romania, do they? I don't really follow it. I just see that because I can see it outside the train station, these Daygamer pests. Pussy panhandling, as I call it, beggars. Yeah, they seem to make a center also for Warsaw with their boot camps and stuff. So I guess they don't do it in Brazil, but I'm sure there are Brazilian guys who offer that service in Sao Paulo. So I'm not really so sure. No immigration. Oh, you mean Brazilians are not emigrating out of the country as opposed to people from Poland going abroad? Not really sure about that. The Brazilians emigrate. A lot of them go to Ireland, so I don't know really about that. And no sanctions. Well, I don't think New Europe is under sanctions, so I'm not really sure what you mean there either. Maybe explain a little bit more. Roddy says, I don't think Odesa is the safest city in Ukraine. Well, the safest city would probably be Uzhhorod, which is on the border. It's like basically right on the border with Slovakia, and it hasn't had, I think it had one rocket attack the entire war, so that's pretty safe and a lot safer than Odesa. He thinks it's 99% Russian. Well, obviously he's a tool. This is Ukraine, and it's more or less, if you stumble at the language, then nowadays it's bilingual for sure. And there's only one official language, is Ukrainian. business lead in Lviv spoke Russian pre-2022. Maybe they were able to speak Russian, but most things were already in Kiev in Ukrainian. So James says a lot of restaurants still open during the war. Yes, all the restaurants open. That's kind of an odd question almost. You can see, you should be able to see all the restaurants open just behind me on this street. So lots of new restaurants opened, some closed down. Actually, Georgian food is actually a great Georgian restaurant, Kinza, just up there, that I often go to. Ukrainian, Belarusian were rural languages, or this was the stigma. Yes, I think in southern Ukraine it became seen as a lower status and is spoken more in the countryside for sure. And that's what's happened with Belarusian, unfortunately, as well, because of it being suppressed at different times by Lukashenko post-independence. It was, in the beginning, 1991, before Lukashenko took over the country, it was the only official language of Belarus. And it was widely taught in Minsk, the capital, in education as the main language of instruction. So it could have become like Ukraine, where it would have been the main language, but Lukashenko decided that people speaking Belarusian are more likely to be the opposition to him. So he suppressed it, except when he sees Russia as the big threat. So actually, I've gotten some intel from Belarus that Belarusian as a language is a bit more prevalent than it was even last year. And that is because Russia is getting closer to trying to annex Belarus. And they may push forward that even faster if they lose in Ukraine, because they're going to have this huge defeat here. And then they're going to need to show some sort of win. That could be the annexation of Belarus to cover up for the loss here. That's one real off-ramp for Putin, is that he annexes Belarus, deposes Lukashenko, presumably, and then maybe even accepts his defeat here. Maybe I'm being too optimistic about that. So yeah, in southern Ukraine, not in western Ukraine, that was the case. I think that's obviously been reversed with this war. So Odesa people are trying to speak more Ukrainian language than Russian. Yes, overall, it's definitely, you hear a lot more Ukrainian than before. Later goes to the issue, is Ukraine a Latvia like Austria that doesn't violate EU language directives? We'll need to expand on that later, greater, because, for example, there's no obligation to have a minority language as an official language. France only has one official language. It has lots of regional languages that they've basically oppressed for the last few centuries, and it's never been an issue really for anyone. So Occitan, ever heard of it? It's the main language in the southern part of France, southern half of France, even 100 years ago. It's actually a Nobel Literature Prize winner who wrote in Occitan, but you probably never heard of it because, they just made the language of the north around Paris, which now is French, the official language. That's it. So Breton might be spoken, Corsican might be spoken, but that's the case. So you'd have to say which language directive, because there is no directive. I'm almost certain saying that. Maybe there's something from, I don't know, the Council of Europe, which is not the EU, saying, about minority languages or something like that. And Ukraine is not even in the EU. And Latvia, there was a bit of a debate when Latvia and Estonia joined about the fact that large minorities in those countries spoke Russian and they didn't have any status for the Russian language. But they won the argument with the EU during the accession process that they shouldn't give it. So now it doesn't seem like it was that unfair that they said the official language is Latvian and in Latvia and the official language is Estonia, and Russian doesn't have official status because Russia uses it in its foreign policy by saying wherever they speak Russian, Russia claims it as a right to intervene and kill people and take it over again. So it's not a good idea to keep speaking Russian basically anywhere if you want your independence. Same here, Georgian food is great. Belarusian Czechs are kind of hot though. Yes, they are. You meet lots of them in Vilnius and Warsaw. Isn't it kind of like if California became its own state? I don't understand. Can you explain, Mark, what you mean by California becoming its own state? Brian says, later greater, I think you're a bit out of touch with reality. Be positive about the people who are trying to do everything they can to protect their country. Are you impressed by his car? No. Later greater, I'm realistic as you can. All right, so this guy is some weirdo talking about EU Ukrainians. I don't know. Are becoming more irrelevant and not going to be good for, I don't know, it's just overregulated retirement homes, don't get a, so I don't know, is this a real person speaking or is it a bot that's gone crazy? Roddy says, is there some animosity against Jewish people? In Ukraine, the president is Jewish. Former Prime Minister Grosma was also Jewish. Yeah, so that's a weird question. I mean, he got elected with 75% of the vote. So most people don't have a problem with being Jewish in Ukraine. It used to be part of Russia, but you already said that. He also, I don't know. Because most aren't chilling anyone, people like crowds. All right. I wouldn't want to come back to Ukraine, says James, if you find a higher paying job and it's going to take Ukraine to move up. Yeah, but you also have to remember that just because your job is higher paying, like this is very relevant in Moldova. The cost of living is 30% lower in Moldova, or even more, especially if you want to buy a house. Say a lot of Moldovans live in Ireland, where they get many multiples the salary. The problem is if they don't own property in Ireland and they need to buy a house and get a mortgage, it's so expensive that they'd be better off just working for 5-10 years in Ireland, saving up the money and just buying a complete place back in Moldova. And then at least they got a house, and yeah, maybe they can find a way to work for less money online and live in Moldova where the cost of living and the weather is way better than Ireland, the food is better, and they already got their house. So it's not really clear whether you will come back, because you got to also factor in the cost of living differential. And many people, they just want to be back. Most people don't want to immigrate. They want to live in their own culture. Even if we've got this broader European culture and people move around, which is great, or in the US as well. How many people actually leave their state? That'd be an interesting stat to know. So a lot of people just prefer life here and really want to contribute to rebuilding Ukraine. But not everybody. Some people are going to stay abroad, obviously. And no, we can't predict how many people that's going to be. A lot of people already came back though. James says, if Ukraine joins the EU, it will cost you a lot of money and be more debt, blah, 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 blah. It's an investment. You would have said, presumably, James, that they shouldn't allow Poland join. Giving all this money to Poland. How will they ever afford it? Waste the money. And look at Poland now. It's going to be, very soon, they won't be able to be eligible for receiving more money than paying in. Ireland also went through that phase where they're going to have to become net contributors because their economy is going to be so good. They're predicted, current trends, to overtake the UK in GDP per capita in the 2030s, probably early 2030s. So it's an investment Ukraine will be securing here from further Russian encroachment. Will definitely be a good investment, because otherwise, if Russia takes here, they're just going to keep going until they're stopped. So, but yeah, Ukraine is a huge opportunity, breadbasket of Europe, of this part of Europe at least. Amazing soil for agriculture. It's just lots of opportunities to become the next Poland. Brandon says, what are your thoughts on investing in real estate in Ukraine? Yeah, that's a tricky question, because obviously you don't want to invest in where that's going to get occupied by Russia, because you will probably lose your rights to property, seeing what happened in occupied territories already, if you don't naturalize as a Russian, which I presume you don't want to do. Then you have to think there are certain trends that are going to happen when the war ends, because I guess it will end at some point. Depending how much of the territory is liberated, a lot of people might move back. For example, if suddenly Mariupol is liberated and people, like the Ukrainians are going to want to repopulate it, right? With people, so many people were killed there. They're going to want to incentivize people to move back to Mariupol. People who have left, some of them will want to come back. So they will leave other parts of Ukraine. So the demand that'll be one negative pressure on the demand in, say, what's currently free Ukraine, because they'll move back there. At the same time, foreigners will come in and invest, so that will obviously be something that will push prices up. And there'll be more and more, I guess, a lot of Ukrainians living abroad, like Moldovans, will send remittances. So it's not entirely clear to me how that will affect the real estate prices at different points. But the long-term projection would be that, of course, it will go up in the long run, and they will join the European Union. So, but that would take a decade, probably, maybe a lot longer, because there's just a lot of unknowns. If you look at Croatia's EU accession process, they obviously had a war in the 1990s, early 1990s, but that still took them 10 years, and they were relatively small with way less issues than Ukraine. So, yeah, I think it would probably take longer than Croatia. So there might be some deflationary pressure actually in the beginning after, for example, say best case scenario, Ukraine liberates all occupied territory and people start to move back there. Then they would move from other parts of Ukraine. Yes, some people will come back from Western Europe, and foreign investment will come in, but you're going to have pressure, some things that are going to push up the prices, some things are going to see it actually push it down. So not entirely clear to me in the short run what would happen with the prices, but long term it would obviously be good. From my point of view, it would be good long-term investment if you're thinking of holding it for 10 years or longer. Yeah, of course you got the risk that Russia flies a drone into your apartment and blows it up, and yeah, you lose a lot of your value when that happens. James said he wouldn't invest. James said renting apartment in Odessa for fully furnished apartment costs $400 to $800 in downtown. Yeah, it probably costs a little bit less now. Going to be high risk reward opportunity at the moment. Yeah, the prices at the moment are about the same as in 2021. So the time to have got your big reward was in late 2022, early 2023, because then the prices, you get discounts. One of my clients got a discount of 40% on a luxury sea view apartment. So, but you don't get that anymore. Even since 2023, it's already back to 2021 prices. Russia gains two things from long war. One, Ukrainian because of fiscal burden in the West. EU starts fragmenting. I don't know. Yeah, but Russia has to keep fighting the war and financing it. So, yeah, pluses and minuses. And they actually help consolidate EU identity by being a constant threat all the time. Now, if you have a big threat with some other people, then you feel more in common with them. So this is also something, well, obviously Russia's trying to undermine the European Union and all their individual countries politically and destabilize them as part of their strategy, but as that's a long geopolitical discussion. James says, I've lived there for a year in Odessa, paid $400 a month. Okay, good for you. Ironically, the person right now seriously has Ukraine's best interest. Yeah, no, he doesn't. Let's dispel anyone that Trump has Ukraine's best interest at heart. He has Donald Trump's best interest at heart, what he believes is. Yeah, he really wants to stop the war because he promised ridiculously to solve it in one day during the campaign trail, and he might get a Nobel Peace Prize, he thinks, out of it as well, no doubt, since everyone keeps talking about it. But like the two sides, there's no peace deal to be had. It doesn't matter if I think he's a great negotiator, you think he's a terrible negotiator, or you think he's a genius and I think he's a moron. What is the peace deal? Russia wants to control Ukraine and Ukraine wants to be independent of Moscow. And there's an impasse militarily. War is continuation of politics by other means. And neither side has won definitively or lost on the battlefield where they feel they have to make huge sacrifices and compromises. So there's no deal. The quickest way to end it would have been to persuade Russia they can't win. Because it's not existential to Russia, it's potentially existential to Putinism. Because he didn't just withdraw his forces when the invasion wasn't successful in the first few months. He could have just withdrawn. He would have stayed in power in Russia. But now he's so far down the rabbit hole that probably he won't stay in power. And but Trump needs to persuade him that he can't win, because Zelenskyy and Ukraine is not going to surrender. They're not going to withdraw these forces out of Donbass like he's trying to propose at the moment, or Putin's trying to propose. Yeah, the Russians can fight, can kick them out if they want, but that'll take them a couple of years at the current pace. And in the meantime, Russia will do very well not to collapse economically. So, yeah. Anyways, I will try not to be provoked into geopolitical discussion. That is on the other channel. Just link to that down below in the description. Later, guys, the country is too optimistic. You can't make me whatever. James, is a lot of restaurants still open? Yes, there are a lot of restaurants. Why? That statement that comes there a lot. Even pro-Ukraine people think it's going to be a stalemate. It will be a stalemate until it's not a stalemate, like the First World War. 10K in photos. Yes, Brandon. That's basically what they're paying for, but there's more seedy stuff they're paying for. But it won't be obvious in the photos what the girls were there to do. That's my understanding, since people associated with who he's paying once approached me, and I understand what's going on in the background. But that's one of the things that they're also trying to pitch now. But there's other potentially illegal activity going on. But it's not happening here in this region. He's going somewhere else in the world for it. Americaners, Irish Saxon, they would rather, yeah. Odessa and Kiev for real estate investment after war, yes, even now. But again, that's another discussion. I guess write me an email, Connor@connorklein.com. or investor in consulting call down below. What is the point of view on the meeting of Trump and Putin? War will continue, and Ukraine will continue to lose territory. Well, tomorrow, you better if I answer this tomorrow, because we're going to have the meeting between Zelenskyy and Trump at the White House. Stevie Wickoff was on the TV. I mean, I try not to dislike him, because he's probably a fine guy to have a drink with and to discuss real estate in Florida with. But what the hell is he doing in negotiations on Gaza, Israel, and Ukraine and Russia? It's daft. The guy has no idea what he's doing or talking about most of the time. Like, he's just like so out of his depth. Maybe he's well-meaning, but he's just like, it's like sending, I don't know, a high-skilled student to the negotiations with Lavrov and Putin. It would be hilarious if it weren't so tragic. But anyways, he was on saying that, yeah, the Russians will put it into their law that they pinky promise they won't invade Ukraine again. It's already part of the legal basis they can't invade Ukraine. Why would putting it in Russian law again? Putin already signed agreements on the territory of Ukraine, on the borders. Never mind the Budapest Memorandum of 1994, when the Ukraine gave the world's third largest nuclear arsenal to Russia. Like, it's a non-starter. So there's no deal to be had. That's it at the moment. If one side starts to win militarily, and this is where I disagree with the Biden strategy, which I misunderstood in late 2022, early 2023. I thought they were going to help Ukraine win, because there was a huge opportunity to win, but they decided, and the impasse was a better result, and they were competent at achieving that. So unfortunately, well, it was good that they helped Ukraine to not get overrun, obviously. But Trump doesn't even seem to have a strategy. His strategy seems to be to try to force Ukraine to capitulate, because he likes to simplify it, and they're just not going to capitulate, because they're not going to be defeated militarily. And if he had armed Ukraine to win, which people who were pro-Ukraine were optimistic that maybe Kamala Harris would have done if she were elected president. Obviously, that's moot. She didn't win the election. But she mightn't even have done that. She might just continue the Biden policy of protracted stalemate anyways. But that's the way to achieve peace on favorable terms to Ukraine, the US, and the collective West. But he doesn't seem willing to do that, at least now. Maybe he'll flip-flop. I mean, he does have a bit of a history of doing that, but for now, no. I expect the meeting tomorrow to be 3 different possibilities. I outlined them in a video on my other channel, but basically either he will blame Ukraine, try to imitate Zelenskyy like he did the last time that Zelenskyy was there, and to say, okay, no more aid, even though, you know, he's supposed to send the aid that Biden authorized when he was still the president, and no more intel sharing, and basically withdraws any sort of support or allowing any more support for Ukraine, or he basically doesn't go that far, allows the Europeans to buy weapons from the US and give them to Ukraine, and still shares the intelligence, and basically says, but I'm not going to be involved anymore in the negotiations, even though he promised to end it in day one, or even before he was elected during the campaign trail. Or he still goes on with this constant melodrama, and in my opinion, humiliation for the US by inviting Putin and still trying to find some sort of solution. There isn't a solution, basically. That's either Putin loses or Zelenskyy loses, and Ukrainians lose or Russians will lose. And then once that becomes clear, then maybe they can negotiate some sort of agreement. But before then, I just don't see why they're expending all this energy and political capital on it. So no. Ukraine doesn't really lose that much territory that's significant. What, in the last 2 years, they've lost, what, 1% or 2% of their national territory. It's not really, at the end of the day, strategic. They can, if Russia cracks like Germany in World War I, then if Russia cracks first, because Ukraine can always crack first as well, of course. And that's a problem with, if Trump cuts off all support and stops the intel sharing, it might lead to that outcome a little bit more. But overall, Ukraine is fighting an existential war for its right to exist, whilst Russia is fighting a war, imperial war of choice. At this point, maybe existential for the leadership, but not for the country. So the more likely outcome is that Ukraine will prevail. Hopefully the European allies step up and fill the gap as quickly as possible, that maybe the US not supporting Ukraine like before will leave. But that's it. Will I be in Ukraine next month? Possibly. I don't consider the Australian journalist. I don't know what this thing is. I don't know, this person's ranting, raving there. Say hello to the lady for me. The article I mentioned talks mainly about the university fee situation, jobs possibly matching up with abuses. Yeah, this is no exit rates. There's a huge net deficit, people leaving. I don't see much evidence for that right now, but maybe things have changed. If anything, I just meet people who've come back, but of course, people leave. Maybe I'm not as aware of that. Ukraine can't jump the line, the West Balkans. Yes, they can. Not for Moldova, I can't see it being vetoed. Maybe for Ukraine. Steven says, hey Connor, we headed to Poland for 3 months, October 9th, and then to Moldova for a couple of weeks. Do you still advise not to go to Transnistria, as I have like a opinion? I don't agree with going there. So, but will you get abducted by the Transnistrian authorities? Probably not, because they don't have any interest in having any attention placed on them at all at the moment. And that, depending on how the elections go in September, things might change rather dramatically in Moldova. I think if the pro-European parties win, then I'm not so sure Transnistria is going to stay so close to Russia. It doesn't have any realistic strategy for being rescued by the Russians at that point, electorally, militarily. And what I hear from my sources is that they're quite open to reconciling with Chisinau. So maybe it'll become fine. But you never know, maybe violence will break out there as well. That's also a possibility. So we just have to see what happens with the elections. From the river to sea, occupied England will be free. I don't know, that's maybe a but. James, why don't you realize we have the best earth materials to build these military equipment, and we get them from China, and China is giving us no points. I guess the war is absolutely helping. The Korean War is a stalemate. Yeah, but there wasn't an imperial war of aggression, the Korean War. So, different situation. If I was Trump, I would not let down to talk to press because he will make a big scene again. Yes, there should be no questions from the press beforehand, not to tempt fate again in another argument. Ukraine is losing ground on the battlefield. Not very much, and not very strategic ground. We saw with what happened in Pokrovsk, just north of it. There was this huge debacle. Described as a Ukrainian military disaster, but Azov went in, and they already basically surrounded the Russian troops there. So, yeah, it's a problem. They had to use the reserves. It was clearly a mistake by the Ukrainian command that they, I assume was a mistake. They weren't trying to let the Russians into that territory. But then the Russians weren't able to keep it because they sent mainly infantry, and now they're either going to get captured, most of them are killed. So, Trump is Zelenskyy said they have to give back all territory of Ukraine, and that won't happen. I don't suppose to see. Well, you wouldn't have been on the right side of history in World War II, James. So you'd have told the French to give the Germans legally about half their country because they can't get it back, but they got it back. So you'd have told the Azeris, yeah, just sign over in Nagorno-Karabakh because they can't get it back. It was over. How many years did Armenia hold on to it, or the Armenians there? I think it was like about 30 years. Azerbaijanis took it back. So yeah, they just built up their military and waited for the right moment. So it's de jure Azerbaijani territory, even if they're ethnic Armenians living there. So tragic that they all left. But yeah, so the only thing that's this endless war. Well, the war will end at some point. Connor, all of you tell us the crap. Yeah, I mean, you can invest in a consulting call if you want me to review a website or something. I'm not a dating site. I'm not going to do it here on the channel. All online dating, whether it's Tinder or a dating site or a matchmaker, it's garbage in 2025. So if you're looking for quality, if you're not looking for quality, then maybe you can still hang out on those places, but that's not where the quality people meet nowadays. Of course there are exceptions, of course there is, an exception proves the rule, but in general they don't. Okay, Moldova is going to take back Bessarabia. No, they don't have territorial designs on Bucha. Dan is in the house. I was about to end the live stream. You come in to troll us, Dan. Good timing. Connor's former client spent a month in Bucharest, and he said way better than Warsaw girls, hotter and way skinnier. Polish girls are also boring girls. So why push Warsaw? Don't get you. Yes, I don't agree that women are better looking in Bucharest. I think Dan, you sent me a photo from Chisinau. So maybe you want to be transparent and tell people that actually, even though you keep dishing Chisinau, you come in the comments here, that it's obviously better in Bucharest if you went there. So in terms of dating, Dan is basically a drifter, to explain for anyone who's not familiar with him. So he does the Schengen shuffle. He can't afford a visa anywhere. So he basically spends 3 months in Schengen, which is Romania, and 3 months outside. And is 47 years of age. And has very high opinion of himself and his value, right, Dan? But it's good to be confident, I'll give you that much. And yeah, he spent more than a month in Bucharest. And yeah, I think Warsaw is better. I think the Ukrainian Belarusian diasporas make it better overall. If you add them into, obviously, the majority of Poles that are there. It's a modern city. I think it's cleaner and nicer than Bucharest. Bucharest has improved a bit. I have another client who's there, actually. And he says it is getting better. But yeah, in terms of what you're interested in, which is, Dan is basically a romance tourist. So yeah, I don't understand why you're... Maybe outline your arguments in favor of Bucharest. Because I don't see it. I don't think that the girls are as good looking in Bucharest, and they're not as... I mean, my experience was I spent a lot of time there, Middle East, many years ago. I think compared to here, no comparison in terms of also their openness. I have some great memories from Romania. I just didn't think it was as cool as being here. For a lot of reasons, not just about dating. Also, really like Bucharest as a city. I think a lot of it's dirty, although okay, they may have improved it a lot. But in terms of dating, no. But I guess for you, you have less foreign competition because there's just so many kind of weirdo day gamers hanging out in around the shopping mall and train stations of Warsaw, that maybe that's not an issue in Bucharest for sure. Did you learn any Romanian, Dan? Maybe outline that as well. Hey Connor, Chris writes here, I'm going to Moldova in translation in October, blah, blah, vendor, any other menus to recommend. I have a guide, Chris, it's all in the guide, purchase it down below. I have collated all the information there, so I can, for Chisinau at least, and the vineyards. Police of goals are hotter nightclubs in Bucharest. No, they are not. I have been to both many times. Hey, Joshua's there. Hey Joshua, what's up? I agree, Warsaw sounds boring. Psychostatic, I don't think this is it. Yeah, I understand Kalia Victoria is pedestrianized on the weekends, and there are lots of girls out taking a stroll. Maybe representative of Khrushchev. Someone else, what's a romance tourist? It's someone who travels for the main purpose of finding love, shall we say. Which is Dan. Well, is he really looking for love? You can answer that, Dan. Romanian don't have good faces, but bodies are top-notch. I don't rate them as highly. Just, you're free to disagree. I wouldn't put Polish women or Romanian near the top in Europe. I say, I'm not trying to offend them unnecessarily. They're obviously on a European level still very attractive on average, but compared to Ukrainians, Belarusians, Latvians, Estonians, Lithuanians, Slovaks, Czechs, no. Moldovans, if I forgot to mention, even Kazakhstanis, no. But at the top end, yeah, I used to go to really an amazing party in Bucharest on a Thursday night. It doesn't exist anymore. It's phenomenal. But an Irish friend there once, he still talked about it almost a decade later. I think it was the best night out he ever had. Number 6. Is being a romance story is a bad thing? I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just it screams scarcity if that's your main reason to go to a place. Like it can be obviously, it can also be your main reason going there, but I think it's good if it's normal that it's a significant factor why you choose a place. But if it's the only real factor why you're going somewhere, means you basically are failing everywhere else, and you gotta really take an assessment about why that is. So it comes off as very needy, and it doesn't. If girls find out that's your main reason, it'll lower their perception of your value for sure, because it just screams that you don't have options everywhere else. And why is that? Yeah, so you need to have another reason to be there. And Dan has no reason to be in Romania other than being a romance tourist. So Dan, maybe outline your success in Bucharest, because, well, do we want to reveal your ethnicity? Because this is also a factor why you prefer Bucharest, because you have less competition for your ethnicity. But that will change. Because if we talk about it here, lots of your ethnicity will probably start to go if they think they have, because they have no chance at Warsaw. Well, they have no edge in Warsaw, putting it that way. There's so many of them running around, but every ethnicity is running around in Warsaw. Connor has a U.S. accent, but he says he's from Ireland. Yes, and I don't think I have a U.S. accent, but you can be the judge of that. And I'm not against the idea of going to Bucharest. I have great memories, but would I pick it over Warsaw? I mean, the cities are pretty similar in size. Warsaw is more developed. And I think the social, yeah, I don't find it boring, Warsaw. That's the difference. But then again, I speak Belarusian, Ukrainian, and Russian, and I even speak basic Polish now. I also speak Romanian. And yeah, I think it's just more dynamic in Warsaw. I think overall it's a better city. And not that Bucharest is terrible or something, but no, I wouldn't choose Bucharest or Warsaw still. But maybe you just find that you were basically a no-hoper in Warsaw, and maybe you had a tiny bit of success in Bucharest, and that makes it a better choice. But it's pretty bad. Dan, you're 47 already. Tick tock. You need to get all that sorted out pretty soon before you hit the wall. I'm also the same age, so I'm not just picking on him unnecessarily. Trolling him. Would be the same for me. As a blonde guy, this person says they prefer Romania. Okay. Joshua says he was talking to his friend the other day about this. Warsaw has a major boost because they're Ukrainians and Belarusians. 100% agree, Josh. If it were just Polish girls there, because in general, the pretty ones are really not into foreigners. Just what I see empirically when I'm there with enough data. I don't know why you're a romance tourist like Dan. Yeah, then I can understand. Like, you basically no-hoper completely. But with the Belarusians, Ukrainians there, it changes the dynamic so much, and you don't have so many of them in Bucharest. And yeah, the upper echelons in Bucharest, maybe let me know, Dan, do you see a lot of them with foreign guys? And he said, that one guy who reacted to me, I can't remember his name or the channel name, but he was like a Romanian guy who had lived or grown up in the US, who moved back because he had this channel. That's I don't watch the content because I just think it's very sensationalist and not of much value to me. But he maintained that if you go to Bucharest and you want to be with the hotties, then you have to have at least €1 million or dollars in capital, otherwise you have no chance. Yeah, if you want a gold digger, if you want to attract a gold digger in Bucharest, I'm sure you need a lot of money. But if you just want a pretty girl, no, you don't need to be. I can say that having spent time in Bucharest, but maybe he doesn't understand that. But he seemed very proud that he got a girlfriend. It was kind of cute that he was showing her off so much in the clips. Is she a 9 or a 10? Go have a look and tell me. I would not say so, personally. Joshua says he was joking. If they're cute, they're Polish. If they're hot, they're Ukrainian. Yeah. Although I think I said in my video, the pretty Poles, cute Ukrainians, and the beautiful Belarusians, but that's just because of the alliteration or assonance. Than the reality is, yes. Ukrainians are better looking on average, in my opinion, than the Poles. Not saying the Poles are terrible at all. Still on the European level, they're above average, but Ukrainians are definitely on average a lot better looking. And the same with Belarusians, the same definitely with Latvians. When I think about it, I said it on the last live stream, because someone asked me directly, where would I go, single guy in Europe? And I would go to Riga. That is the place I would go to. But it doesn't seem to be a popular destination on YouTube or amongst my clients, but I did have that one consultant client invest in the call and explained why, and it worked out for him in Riga. So that's a good, I guess, extra data point. And I do have one client who is basically obsessed with the Baltics. We've been at least 4 times together there on the New Europe experience. Tall in Riga, yes. Let me explain again. if you were after model beauty, tall. There are a lot of blondes as well, if that's your preference, but a lot of brunettes as well in Riga. Estonians and Finns are more blonde, same with Swedes. I just think the style, the looks that they have, the height, no better city in the world, I think. Of course, there are bigger cities where you can get that concentration at the very top end. So yeah, you could say like a Kiev or a Moscow or a bigger city. Is a really bigger city? So I don't even think St. Petersburg would be as good. And I'm not advocating going to Russia anyways. Is there another big city? Or Warsaw is a bigger city, right? So maybe at the top end you have that concentration of beauty. Maybe, but especially if you can speak Russian like I can. Even though I've met lots of really beautiful Latvians who are Latvian speaking, not Russian speaking as well. So yeah, Swedish chicks also super hot. Even though it gets a bad rep from the manosphere because they're all feminists. But I always had a great time in Sweden. I'm not gonna knock the Swedish ladies. There are plenty of cities with hotties in Poland outside of Warsaw. The best hottie I've ever seen from Good Dance. From a village near Good Dance. Well, we're not going to villages, rather. And yeah, I also had a good time in Good Dance. What time is 8:30? Right, not too bad for getting food afterwards. I have to decide. What should I go for? Georgian cuisine, Crimean Tatar cuisine. There's actually some Greek. I haven't been to the Greek restaurant. I went to my favorite pinza place already. I didn't go to the ribs place, and I didn't go to the Greek place. What do I want to do? Because in theory, be my last dinner in Odessa for at least a week. So, we're almost up to 90 minutes. Josh says Sweden is amazing. I agree with you on that, Josh. I think you were in Serbia. I looked at your last videos. I'm just not so enthusiastic. I left a comment on one of yours because you were at the waterfront area.
Welcome to
Belgrade.
Odessa.
Thank you. And in Riga, they're actually building the same developers a waterfront. At least on the designs, it looks nicer than one in Belgrade, but they look cool in Belgrade as well. But I guess this is their second one, so maybe they're making it a bit fancier and a bit more futuristic. And yeah, it's good. I think they were 10 years into development in Belgrade, so we'll see how long it takes in Riga. But Riga's, if it's successful, this will put Riga really on the map as an international city, I think. And definitely increase its popularity. But for now, I'm looking forward to hopefully going back there in September. I've got so many things that are probably going to happen in September because I'm going to be with this client for at least a week, if not 2 weeks. He's coming to Ukraine. And I need to go back to, well, we might go to Moldova as well together. So I guess that will take care of that thing because I really need to go back to Moldova, finish up the filming. I may even need to go back in September. And then, you know, to be in Kazakhstan already in October maybe makes, I need to go to Warsaw. Definitely in September. Maybe even late August. And yeah, I want to go back to Riga and film this video that I said I would film. So, and hopefully I go with a client or two there. So if you are interested in coming to Kazakhstan in October, fill out the application form down below. Going back to Kazakhstan, going back to the Central Asian steppes, going to be absolutely mad to be back. It's going to be very cool. Almaty, one of my favorite cities in the world. Beautiful nature nearby. You got the mountains, you got the lakes, you got the canyons, you got the super friendly Kazakhstanis. Who doesn't love the Kazakhstanis? No Borat stereotypes. 85% Asian, 15% European heritage. Modern city, 2 to 3 million people. And yeah, I think it's super cool atmosphere. We do have a little bit of foreigner factor if you're a single guy, which is all the guys who come with me to Kazakhstan. And I guess if you're not into Asian girls, then maybe it's not our Asian culture at all, then maybe not as interesting because it's only 15% European. Although I did have a client who came there and actually said that he dated better looking women in Almaty than in Moscow back in the day. So, and he was only into European descent women. So, but I love it. I'm really excited to go back. So, application form down below. Also, the Baltics in September, application form down below. Maybe if I also want to go back to Moldova in September, I could squeeze it in. Again, application form down below, so you'll get me as your mentor. And it is best for guys that are considering a move to the region for at least 3 months a year, because we'll also look at all the legal stuff that comes up, real estate. You'll have me with you. I'm definitely I would consider myself the best verse for culture in this region. dating in this region as a straight guy with high standards and all the social dynamics that go on. Also meeting high-level guys or guys you're going to have a lot in common with, because you don't want to end up building no mates. So you can streamline all this and save yourself months and not years of hanging out and work, trying to build those connections. And if you're doing something wrong socially, you're never going to know unless someone points it out to you. So good luck with that otherwise. And most of the whole dating world is full of charlatans, so good luck with finding someone who's actually going to really help you in that space, so we can get all of this solved on the in-person experience. I have many clients who are repeat clients because they want to go to different cities, and a lot of them they just want to go with me and check out the city and have me make that experience absolutely unforgettable, and of course party hard with the hotties, the 9s and 10s of the region. Dan, maybe you want to confess a few things about dropping the ball in Warsaw, especially with girls who were very interested in guys of your ethnicity, but unfortunately you didn't close out those deals. That's maybe why you think that Bucharest is better, but if you come with me, you would have presumably the same opportunities in Bucharest. Anyways, that you either would have or not have closed. Belgrade improved a lot, says Josh, since he was there. Big draws for the people. Is the people for me so easy to make friends compared to Warsaw? Okay, interesting to get your feedback on that. I'm not really too interested in going back to Belgrade. I didn't really like it so much back in the day. I was almost murdered there as well. Don't hold anything against the Serbian people. Just one person trying to stop me. He was also Roma, by the way, so I also don't hold against the Roma in general. That he, yes, a taxi driver tried to stab me in the neck while he was trying to rob me. But he didn't succeed in robbing me or killing me. So, but a very stressful and traumatic experience nonetheless. But I went back to Belgrade after. I had a great time in Novi Sad. So, not in Serbia. Political situation, not the best in Serbia at the moment, but economically it's done reasonably well in the last few years. So, kind of on the up if they could maybe resolve their political issues to become really part of New Europe, then that would be obviously something I would endorse. Mark says, hot Asian chicks in that country? Yes, the best, in my opinion. Is Kazakhstan safe? Yes. You say one Russian guy was shot last night. Well, don't be Russian and go there and cause problems then. I don't know what happened in that case, so being a bit facetious. I did only ever have a problem since 2022 with one Russian, and it was in Kazakhstan. The guy came to my table when I was with a bunch of girls and wouldn't leave. And I took one look at him. I said, okay, I'm not an aggressive person, but you need to leave this table. And I started a conversation in Russian saying, you're not from Kazakhstan, right? He says, yeah, I'm from Russia. Well, this is Kazakhstan, not Russia, and you need to get off this table. And he said, oh, you have an accent, you're from Europe, and started causing trouble. So I was like, all right, let's get this solved. But I solved it diplomatically. I had a summit, inverted commas. I recognized that it was probably his friend 4 meters away. I say, hey, is this your friend? He's like, yeah. You need to this is not Russia. You need to get him off my fucking table straight away. And he looks pretty scared because he probably didn't want to get deported back to Russia. And that is likely what would have happened if he'd been stopped by the Kazakhstani police, because they were taking no prisoners in inverted commas. They were pretty aggressive towards Russians who came during the mobilization period. They're worried about the country being destabilized by them. So, yeah. Anyways, that's just anecdote from the past. Ataviani says, even Zelenskyy said that it's not possible to predict. No, he has not accepted that at all. The official position is liberation of all occupied territory. He says, oh, in the short term, you might be able to come. The longer it drags out, the more likely that one of the sides will really hit problems economically, in Russia's case, which then affect their ability to prosecute the war, or Ukraine on the battlefield. That's why both sides believe that they're going to prevail if they hang in there. Putin has just his own life is dependent on it, because what's he going to do if they lose the war? Or if he ends the war without a victory, it's going to be very hard for him to stay in power. He might succeed, but he seems determined to hang in there. But he was right to wait for Trump to become elected, because, yeah, obviously he has more chances now that Trump is. I still think he'll fail, and we will film on this channel once again in Crimea. but I don't know when that's going to be. See this war ending exactly the way it happened to the Korean War? No, will not end like the Korean War. That is a very low probability. We're going to see north and in east and west Ukraine, because Russia as an imperial power will annex that territory illegally and occupy it illegally. That is not the situation in the Korean War. And at a certain point, Russia will be forced, presumably, to decolonize. I would like it to be sooner rather than later. And they will have to leave that territory. It's what the Azerbaijani president said to Zelenskyy. He made a public statement: never give up on the territory, never concede it. Just like Azerbaijan, you will take it back eventually. So I hope we don't have to wait 20 or 30 years to go back to Crimea. But so maybe listen to someone who gives you a real assessment of what goes on. But I understand with so much misinformation and with all this analysis online. I watched one guy who was pro-Russian, and it's just, the guy's obviously never been to Ukraine. He has no idea what he's talking about. Saying the ethnic Russians need to be protected. What are you ranting about? You need to be protected from fucking Russia. The best place to be, before the 2022, there was a joke that the best place to be as a Russian speaker, the safest place to be was in Ukraine, because then you were far away from Vladimir Putin and the Putinism. And the Russian speakers of Ukraine, they need protection from Russia, not from Ukrainians, from their own people. I want to move to learn the language so I can talk to the hot chicks. Is there well, it's fine. I don't think it should be the only reason, because that screams to scarcity. And you need to think, why have we got so much scarcity? How do you know that he was Roma? Did I ask him? No. He was there. The taxi drivers outside the clubs were all Roma. And they were speaking to each other in Romani. They were not speaking to each other in Serbian. So, but he spoke some German, because when he threatened me with a knife, he threatened me in German, which I also speak. So we had this weird argument in German. If someone is speaking Romani and looks Roma and is hanging out with other people who look Roma, then a Roma. But presumably a Serbian citizen. Anyways, I hate Serbs or the Roma as a result, even of that. Great live stream, says Stephen. Thanks, Steve. Good luck in Poland and Moldova. You should have a great time again. Mark says, I don't know how you're not pressed with. Fair enough, Mark. Mark, did you tell me that you were going to send me an email? Was it you last week? I didn't receive an email. Just let me know. The email address is connor@connorklein.com. It's down below in the video description. All right. Almost 100 minutes of this live stream. And I kept my shades on for the whole time, even though it's gotten dark behind me. So final questions, final comments. It's the end of an era. Odesa of old will not be Odesa of the future, but that doesn't have to be grim or gloomy. I believe in a bright long-term future for Ukraine as part of the European Union, with greater economic development and freedom from Russian aggression in the long term, and becoming the new Poland. That should cause a bit of a dilemma for all those pro-Russian Putin lovers who hang out in Warsaw saying how great it is. Well, if the future of Ukraine can be Poland, how can you disagree with it? So, the war that started in 2014, the sacrifices have been made by the Ukrainian people that other countries didn't have to make. There's this, the world is not just. Poland didn't have to make the same sacrifices, at least so far, and fingers crossed they don't have to. Same with the Baltics. And it was Ukrainians that had to make these huge sacrifices in order to earn the right, starting in 2014, to join the European family, rejoin it, definitively. Mark says, I really thought to move to learn the language was a good reason. Well, yeah, that's one reason, if you just want to learn the language. Of course, coming to the country makes a lot of sense, because then you can practice every day. Yes, consulting. All right, cool. I'll wait for your email on that. But it should be one element. If you're only coming for and I don't encourage people to come to Ukraine during the war, because some dodgy matchmaker told them that there are the traditional ladies here who are desperate to leave. Don't come, if that's your only interest. I recounted last week from my apartment, 2:30 in the morning, watching the searchlights, the anti-aircraft fires strafing the sky, lighting it up like fireworks, blowing up a drone a few hundred meters from my apartment. If you're only interested in chicks, I don't think you want to live through that, because it's pretty intimidating. Seeing the searchlights, move further and further towards your apartment, knowing that they're trying to shoot a drone down just above you. And if they hit it, it's going to drop potentially on your apartment and kill you. So even if the probability is very small, very low, but you may see things you don't really want to see if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. So Mark's not going to come during the war. Yeah, but there are guys that makes a lot of sense to come here. Like I'm here, like my client comes next week. He's really determined to move to Ukraine after the fighting stops. So he wants to already get ahead of the curve. He wants to get ahead of the pack that's going to come here. Like one of my friends quipped that, yeah, it's so great that you don't have the hordes of horny foreigners here. I mean, it's an exceptional time to be in Ukraine. He said once the war ends, they'll all come back and be super annoying. And I guess that's the silver lining, but yeah, I'd rather not have Russian rockets and stuff and have to put up with the sex tourists or the romance tourists than this war for sure. But that will be resolved in due course. So final comments, final questions, please, as before I wrap it up here. Is there anything else I want to say? Yes, all the relevant links are down below. Consulting, if you want to do it yourself, you can tap into my encyclopedic knowledge. No, you cannot get the same information on ChatGPT, because I even check it to see if it's really a rival. But it's a very useful resource, and I use it also when I'm preparing stuff now. So yeah, it changes the dynamics of what's the value added. But if you want to come and implement everything in person and have your mentor with you, so you don't spend months or years trying to figure everything out yourself, and going around building nomads in a new country, it's always suboptimal. I actually had to do this in the beginning in lots of places. It takes a bit of a toll psychologically having to do it as well. So maybe it's even going to be more difficult for you to do psychologically. And yeah, I had a lot of luck figuring out how to build up my social circle here in Odesa, for example. And I didn't really appreciate how valuable it would be until I had it. And it was like, yeah, it's like night and day the experience. So I'm going to be here with the insiders, and known as by my clients for the region down below. Apply for the in-person experience. You have the other options of consulting call. I do have my online programs. I don't really promote them very much anymore, but you can write me an email if you want access to those at a big discount, because nowadays I don't produce many new ones. I don't update them. And most of them are pre-2022. So you can write me an email, connor@connorklein.com for that. And yeah, you also have the guides, the insider guides for Ukraine and for Moldova down below in the description. And you get my hospitality guide. Again, you can't get that on ChatGPT because I tested it and it will waste your time. ChatGPT cannot figure out where to go because that information is not fed to it. You have to buy a specialized guidebook, I guess, to get access to it, like mine or someone else's. And there aren't so many guides for Moldova anyways. So down below in the description, go get that if you're planning to go to Ukraine or Moldova. And do I have any final comments or questions? Josh, maybe write me a message. Let me know if you're planning to come to Ukraine or to the Baltic states or to Poland or to Moldova or Kazakhstan in the next few months. And yeah, maybe Brandon, let me know how you're getting on. I see that you are also got a YouTube channel. If you're back in this region or not. You seem to be considering real estate in Ukraine. He has a sovereign man concept. I'm not a big fan of sovereign man concept. Personally, I think you should integrate into the society that you move to, which sovereign man mentality is not in favor of. It's more libertarian, from what I understand anyways. Wherever you go, whatever you do, you may have to look for Irish be there with you. Thanks very much for that. All right, Robert, I see your comment on my private chat, so I'll reply to that after the live stream. All right, lads and ladies, if there are any lasses on the live stream. As I always say, I did have one female client who was married to a Ukrainian who wanted to get him to agree to divorce. It was many moons ago here in Odesa. Kind of interesting. She was from Alaska. How ironic. Considering the Putin-Trump summit on which Trump referred to accidentally as Russia indirectly a couple of times, and then he said he was leaving for the US afterwards. I know he misspoke, but come on. You can't do it that many times when people ask him questions about your cognitive ability. But it happens, I understand. Anyways, on that more lighthearted note about whether Alaska is really American or the Russians, well, once one stage want to come and take it back. Oh, I have a new question. She wanted your help with finding him a new wife. No, he'd already met someone else, but he wasn't agreeing to the divorce. That was the issue. So we resolved that. Without having to do anything violent or illegal or anything. With the powers of persuasion. With my powers of persuasion, with my legal training. We got him to agree immediately to the divorce and he signed it. So mission accomplished. So she definitely got good value out of me. Anyways, on that note, I will say what anything else. Yes, the end of an era, both for this new brand here. So Tsar Experience, rest in peace as a brand. It's the new Europe experience under my own personal branding. My name, Connor Klein. I have a great name with the alliteration anyways. So if you want to come and live your best life in this region, I'm your insider. I'm your Irish boy on the ground, even during this war in Odesa Mama. And yeah, Odesa Mama of old also, or rest in peace. There will be a new, brighter, better Odessa in the future. Same for the rest of Ukraine and for this region in general. I think, Josh, in your videos, you always like to say that the fact that the price level has gone up is actually good in a lot of ways, because also we obviously have to pay more money, but it's a bit of a barrier entry, so we don't have the passport pro crowd hanging out and kind of sullying the name of being a foreigner, like those dastardly Daygamers do in Warsaw outside the train station. Man, it's just like terrible. So low value. And as I said last week, the guy who came up to me was from North Macedonia in Chisinau, told me that there is violence against Daygamers in Chisinau. I don't endorse that, but still bear in mind that you are being a public nuisance, and I don't endorse that behavior. And yeah, I shouldn't even bother really talking about it. Unfortunately, it comes up a little bit. Same with the matchmakers. I'd rather just focus in future on, yeah, things that are more relevant to living a high-level lifestyle in this region, in New Europe. That is the new brand. And yeah, geopolitically, I'm going to look forward to eventually Ukraine victory prevailing in the Russo-Ukrainian War. So Slava Ukraini, do перемоги, and see you on the next live stream. I'm not sure if it's going to be in Ukraine or it's going to be somewhere else, because I will be traveling with my client. Not sure I'll have time for one, but if I'm in another Ukrainian city and it is of a value for me to do this kind of more public service with the live stream, doing that maybe from Lviv, Chernovtsi, Kiev, or another city next week. In the meantime, stay safe, stay strong, and do побачення from Odesa Mama.